Okay, as we start, we're making the transition from mitosis and meiosis. Okay, we talked about in the bell ringer what gives us a variety of life. That is meiosis. Craig told us that meiosis makes what type of cells? Haploid cells. Now those have half the amount of chromosomes. So then with fertilization we get different combinations, and that's what makes you all look different and appear different. Okay, so we're going to start talking more about different traits and what you look like. Okay, what traits you've got. But it's important to have a good understanding of the history and kind of where we've come from and where we are now. Okay, so a couple things, and the first word we need to define and needs to go in your notes is that word heredity. Okay, that word heredity goes in your notes. Okay, now heredity is the passing of traits from parent to offspring. It's the passing of trait from parent to offspring. Whether we like it or not, and I'm sure you've heard it, many of you have probably heard it in the past. Okay, you resemble your mom, you look like your dad, or you've got your dad's nose, you look, okay? Just in appearance, you've probably gotten that before. Or I can tell that you are a, okay, no, that you are a Mullins, or I can tell that you're a Wilson, I can tell that you're a Bennett, okay? How you fit in, okay? How you look within your family. These are all traits, and we're studying those traits. Now, as I've told my other classes, we're going to be talking a lot about traits, and more specifically, we're going to be talking a lot about observable traits. As we talk about observable trait, we've got a general rule in here. This rule hasn't changed, okay? But we don't make fun of people. We don't say, you've got that, that's weird. Okay, but we're going to talk about things, especially starting tomorrow, like we're going to talk about our earlobes. We're going to talk about our...
Interruption, please. Would Jordan Jones please report to Ms. Mullins' room? Jordan Jones.
Okay, we're going to talk about whether or not we can roll our tongue. We're going to talk about our hair color. Okay, so different things that we inherit. Okay. So as we continue to talk about this, I want you to keep in mind we need to remember that appearance doesn't make somebody who they are. Okay? Now the other thing and the other learning target that we've got is we can recognize the difference between inherited traits and learned traits. So later on in the unit, we're going to be talking about learned traits. And my opinion is those kind of make you more of who you are. Okay? Those make your personality, whether you're mannerly or not. Okay, whether the way you talk, okay, is a learned trait. The way you use a fork, the way you use a pencil. Okay, all of those things kind of mold you more than, let's say, your observable traits. Okay, so I just want you to be thinking about that as we go through. Now, as we look and as we talk about the history, we've got 3 individuals we're going to talk about today. Okay, 3 individuals. The first one, I'm sure you might recognize his name. Okay, Aristotle. How many of you have heard of Aristotle before? Okay, Aristotle was a very intelligent man for his time. Okay, we might look back now and kind of laugh at him or chuckle at some of his ideas. But for where they were in 384 BC, he was probably one of the most intelligent men of that time period. Okay, and he started looking at traits, and what he realized, okay, he started to see the same things we do. Okay, we resemble our parents in some way or another. Now, we're not identical to them, but he wanted an explanation for that. And so Aristotle's explanation became that somehow the blood of mom and the blood of dad became mixed. Okay, in the process. And we won't go into details there. But in the process, the blood got mixed. Okay? Then from there, your blood would be the mix of your parents' blood. And he felt that the blood held our code. Okay, now I'm seeing some of you smile, some of you saying that's weird. Okay, and I can see it in your face. Was Aristotle right? No. Okay, no, it's not a mixing of blood. Okay, now are our cells in the blood? Yes, okay, so our blood is actually an inherited trait. We get that, we inherit it. Our blood type comes from mom and dad. Okay, but when we look at Aristotle, okay, he definitely got the ball rolling. Okay, he started recognizing that something's holding the code, and he helped us explore that a little bit more, and we eventually have found out that it's the cells. Now, there's another gentleman that we need to know and recognize. His name is Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Okay, now he took a little bit of a different approach. Okay, his approach was he focused more on change and how we change and how organisms change. Okay. Change over time, what's that word? That science vocabulary word. Change over time is evolution. Okay, so he was looking at the evolution of different organisms. Okay. And basically his idea and his suggestion was that as things evolve and as things change, they're going to pass on those things. Okay, so one of his biggest things is he looked at birds. Okay, he looked at birds and he said, birds always didn't have their long legs. Birds didn't always have their webbed feet. Okay. In order to get fish, think about flamingos. Okay, and flamingos is a prime example. He really felt that they continued and they started to stretch their legs without even thinking about it. His theory was that they stretched their legs in such a manner that they slowly started to lengthen. Okay, now as their legs got longer and longer and they lengthened and stretched, then they passed on those long legs to their offspring. The same thing with webbed feet. As they started to sink into the mud, okay, they, without thinking about it, would stretch their toes. Okay, and by stretching their toes, they slowly developed webs in their feet. And his theory was that because once they developed webs, and it became easier and easier for them not to sink in the mud, that was passed on, okay, to their offspring. Now, was Lamarck 100% right?
No.
No. Okay? For instance, somebody brought up talking about, and it's a short story the story of it. Okay? So he had some theory there. Now, he also said if for some reason an organism didn't use an organ or a part, for instance, he had this theory that snakes once had legs. Okay? Now, the snakes apparently didn't use their legs, so that's how they lost their legs. That was his theory. Okay? Now, there is some truth behind some of his thoughts, that we do pass some things down. Okay? Not all of them are observable as we evolve and change. Okay? But he still is thinking in the right direction and getting that ball moving. Now, the last person we're going to talk about, and is going to be the person we refer to over and over again on a regular basis, and he is considered the father of genetics. And before I tell you his name, let's go ahead and define genetics, because a lot of you are going to be doing genetics and asking questions about genetics in the next several weeks. Okay, so genetics is the study of traits, of how traits are inherited. So, as we start talking about hitchhiker's thumb and widow's peak and eye color and blood type, as we start talking about these things, you might have a tendency to go home, okay, and those of you that have brothers and sisters, you might say, well, can you roll your tongue, or do you have a hitchhiker's thumb? Okay, then you might tend to ask other members of your family, well, do you have that? Where did I get this trait from? So you're going to start kind of studying and exploring your own genetics in a sense. Now, as I said before, okay, inherited traits, it happens whether we like that or not. We get half from mom and we get half from dad. We can't pick and choose. Okay? And I just want you to remember that that doesn't necessarily state who you are. It's also about your learned traits too. Okay? And you'll find it's funny when we start talking about learned traits, you realize that your learned traits aren't just from your parents. Okay? Those of you that might have step parents, you've learned a lot of different things from them. Those of you that are around any of your grandparents, you get learned traits from your peers. So again, those are also developing what makes you you, and I want you to continually remember that, okay? All right, so the father of genetics. Father of genetics, his name, and he goes in your notes, his name is Mr. Gregor Mendel. Mr. Mendel.
Do we make it Mr.?
No, you can put his first and last name. Okay. Now, he is our father of genetics. That's what he's known for. He was a monk. He was an Austrian monk. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means here in a second. So I'm watching you write that down. Hey, what does a monk mean? To be a monk. Can anybody share that with me? What's it mean to be a monk? Zach?
Isn't it like one of those guys that just like sit around and don't talk and like try to get inner to God?
Okay, so they pretty much devoted their life to
Their religion.
Now, okay, a lot of you, and I've had it happen today, a lot of you automatically assume that they're Buddhist. Okay, not all monks are Buddhist. Okay, but I guess that's kind of what you're talking about, or a little bit what you're talking about in social studies. Okay, so it's different religions and they devote their life. So he was an Austrian monk. Now, he not only devoted his life to his religion, but he was very interested in this genetics. And so he devoted a lot of his time to genetics as well. His most famous work, yes, you read it right. Okay, they are the pea plants. How many of you have eaten peas before? Okay, his most famous work was working with those plants. All right, now he had over 30,000 plants. Okay, that's a big number. Imagine that many plants in your house. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't think he had that many at one time, but that involves a lot of different plants. Okay, so he was a very interesting man, very different man. One thing that made him different or set him apart from other scientists, he smoked 20 cigars a day, so he constantly had a cigar in his mouth. Okay? He had, not only did he have all of these plants that we talked about, but he was famous for his work with bees as well. He had over 50 hives of bees. Okay? He had several cages of mice. Okay? And it was interesting because he didn't work at a university. Now, as being a scientist, a lot of your scientists associate with a certain university. There's several reasons why scientists try to do that. Number one, they get some money from it, or they at least get their research being funded. Number two, it's nice to be able to work in a university where you've got other people to talk about and converse with. Okay, maybe you got stuck on something or you needed somebody else's outlook. Okay? So, he didn't have any of that contact. Now, this was a long time ago. He didn't have texting. He didn't have emailing. He didn't have his phone. So, he couldn't just call somebody up either. So, he was very, very isolated, and he spent all of his time working in his journals. Now, it wasn't until those journals were found that he was truly appreciated. And we'll talk a little bit more about his journals here as we go through. Craig, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. So there's why Mr. Mendel is different. Now, he had a couple different things that he really helped us with. Okay? 3 things. Alec, pick your head up, please. Thank you. Okay. His first major thing that he helped us with is that he traveled and traced a trait through many generations. Okay? So we traced one trait through many generations. So if he was working with his plants, and we'll talk about why he chose pea plants in a second. But if he was working with that, he literally traced from generation to generation what the traits were. Okay? Because he did that, he was able to record how they are passed on. Okay, so he was able to record also how the traits were passed along. All right, and that keyword, and we're going to use some math in this unit. Okay, he was the first to use the mathematics of probability. We're going to be using some percentages and some fractions a little bit to explain heredity. So as you look around, there is a chance that you got, or a percentage chance that you got the hair color that you did. There is a percentage, there was a chance that you got a hitchhiker's thumb or not. There is a chance that you got a widow's peak or not. So it's all based on math. Okay, so here's a prime example of how science and math are connected. And if you don't know what one of those things are, we're going to talk about them more tomorrow, so we'll explore those. Okay, and those will be explained to you. So why did he focus on pea plants? Well, the first thing, Craig?
That was what I was going to say. Was he trying to find the magic beans?
No, he wasn't. Good joke, though. Good joke. Okay? The lovely thing about pea plants is that they grow really fast. Okay? They grow really rapidly, so he could have many generations at one time. So as he looked at, okay, the first thing, and you'll see that in your notes, okay, why pea plants, they grow fast. The second thing is there were lots and lots of observable traits. And I want you, next to where that says, in your notes it says, why pea plants? The second bullet says they have many observable traits. I want you to write these traits down next to that. And I'll go ahead and circle them. So we'll start listing them. So he recorded everything on this list. He recorded the shape of the seeds. So if you've ever noticed or studied, next time you have peas for dinner, you'll think about Mr. Mendel. Okay? And you'll notice, I want you to notice, are they round or are they wrinkled? Okay? The color of the seeds, there are yellow seeds and there are green seeds. Okay, and that's actually the pea itself. Color of the pods, they could be green or yellow, and these are all things that he was observing. Okay. Plant height. Pea plants tend to be either tall or short. There's no in between with them. The position of the flowers. Pea plants have flowers, and where those flowers are located is determined by genetics. Okay? And the flower color. So if it's purple or white. Those are all observable traits. Now I want you to think back to Mr. Mendel's journals. Okay, how many plants did he have? 30,000 roughly, okay, an estimate. He recorded all of these traits for each plant. Okay, so do the math real quick. 30,000 times, how many are there? 7? 30,000 times 7. 210,000. Okay, so thinking about all of this data, and that's just the data that he collected. Okay, journals and journals and journals of data we're talking about. Okay, all of these observable traits. So as we worked on pea plants, okay, Okay, so as we look at what Mendel's experiment was, and we'll kind of get some sense of what he did. His first cross that he did, he crossed plants, okay? But the first cross he did is he focused on purebred plants. Okay. Well, you've heard the word purebred. I know horse country, okay? In animals, a lot of times we hear that word purebred. So what does it mean? Okay, in the sense of, let's say that I have a purebred German Shepherd at home. Okay, what does that mean? Isaac?
It's not mixed with anything else.
It's not mixed with anything else, so that means that its mom and dad were German Shepherds. What about their mom and dad? Okay, and their mom and dad's? German Shepherds. So there's never been a Beagle or a Basset Hound in the mix. Okay, it's been continued to be German Shepherds. Okay, Same thing with purebred. So when we talk about what Mendel did in his experiment, is he crossed two plants. Now, how do we cross two plants? Okay, what type of reproduction is it?
Mitosis.
It's asexual reproduction. Okay, we've got pollination and germination of the seeds going on, and so that's what he was able to do. Now, what he did is he took a purebred plant with two purebred plants with different traits. So in the case, and you can kind of see some of the examples in your notes there, okay? He took a purebred tall and crossed it with a purebred short. What do you think he got?
Purebred middle.
Okay, now I already told you there's no medium. There's no in between with that. Okay? All right, so Zach's saying there's a 50-50 shot. I'm hearing all tall. I'm hearing some of you say all short. I'm hearing medium. Okay? In the case of this, and when he crossed purebred, what he found, okay, and he found many different patterns as he crossed these, and we'll list them. Okay, and let's record what he had. So when he crossed a tall and a short, what he found were all tall, no matter how many times he did it. Okay, as long as it was purebred tall and purebred short, he got all tall, no matter what. Okay, round seed and wrinkled seed, he got all round. A yellow seed and a green seed, he got all yellow. And a full pod and a not full pod, he got all full. And a green pod and a yellow pod, he got all green pods. Okay, so it's almost like those second ones just kind of disappeared, right? In a sense. And that's what he started to kind of notice. Hey, what's happening to these second ones? Okay, so that's when he said, okay, what happens when I take my all tall ones? Okay, first off, what do we know about these all tall ones? Are they purebred anymore?
No.
No, because they've been crossed with a short. Okay, so they're not purebred. So his second cross, what he did is he said, I'm going to take two of these all tall ones, and I'm going to see what happens then. Any thoughts? Okay, I heard all short. Any other thoughts? Guesses? All tall? Any other guesses? All right, I've stumped you, I think. All right, so when he crossed the two, and you'll see in your notes, it says for the second cross, okay, when Mendel crossed the offspring, their offspring showed both of the original traits. So as we go through, okay, it says when take the tall offspring from the first cross and cross them, the result is, okay, so when you cross a tall with a tall, which is already in your writing, you're going to get some short and some tall. So he noticed that he started to get an assortment, which he thought was different and unique. So those, some short and some tall, go in your notes there. If you're confused as to where we are, just ask a shoulder buddy. All right, so when he took those and remember, they're not purebred. Okay, and we know that. They're not purebred. Okay, so because of this, Mendel kind of came up with three concepts as he was studying this, and we're going to talk about his three rules, and that's where we're going to finish off for today. Okay, so he came up with three kind of main rules, laws of genetics. The first thing he recognized in rule number 1, you see what word there? Genes. Okay, now they're different than your blue jeans. I know, cheesy science joke, but I had to say it. Okay, I had to say it. So rule number one, he coined that word genes. And he's the one that kind of came up with it. Okay, and what genes are they are the basic unit of heredity. Basic unit. So take a minute and write that down. Okay, and so your traits are determined by what genes you have. Okay, so Marin's traits say that she's going to have that hair color. Okay, Lauren's traits tell her whether or not she's able to roll her tongue or not. Jameson's trait says whether or not he has a hitchhiker's thumb. Okay, or I'm sorry, Jameson's genes say that. That holds the code. Okay, those are run by your chromosomes. Okay, so then the second thing that he said, okay, beyond genes, he said, okay, genes are made up of what we call alleles. And we're going to write it down. And we've got 2 alleles per trait or per gene. And I want you to write both of those there. Okay, 2 alleles per trait or gene. Can you say that word, allele? Okay, I know a lot of times when you look at it, you want to call it something else. Allele is how it's pronounced. Okay, all right. So offspring have 2 alleles, and you've got yourself a little note there. Where do you get the 2 alleles from? 2 alleles. You get one from mom and one from dad, whether you like it or not. Okay, so you get one from each parent. All right, and his third rule and his third kind of goal as he started looking at these is he said, okay, and there tends to be what we call a dominant and a recessive trait. Okay, so we recognize that there's dominant and recessive. Okay, and just like the word leads to, anytime something's dominant, it tends to win, dominate, okay, take over. And that's the same thing. When you've got a dominant and a recessive, the dominant takes over the recessive. Okay, or the dominant hides the recessive. All right, so with that being said, we're going to stop our notes right here, but if you've looked in the agenda, you've gotten a preview. I see some of you putting your notes out, but you've got about 4 minutes to take a look at your workbook, and you've only got 1 page. Let's go ahead and write it down. It's page 121 in workbook. And it starts on page 304. Yes. Okay, so it starts on page 304 in the book. And so you got about 4 minutes. You will see everything that we talked about today, and that'll start your preview there. Okay?